Welcome to DucBloke Tuning. Please like and subscribe and leave comments in the comment section.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of DucBloke Tuning and Finding the Sweet Spot. Today we've got a little bit of a break from the norm video that's going to focus on DAPs, or digital audio players. I was fortunate enough to be part of the tour for the Hiby R8ii. This came to me through my association with Audio Geek Brotherhood of Audiophiles. Shout out to Sandeep. Thank you so much for being our fearless leader and getting all this stuff on tour to us. And a shout out to Hiby for sending this to me as well so that I could have a good tour around the unit, give you guys my impressions. This channel is built around tuning, creating PEQs to get the best out of your investment in your IEMs. Equally as important is how you're actually reproducing that music, what sort of players you're using, what sort of dongles you're using, what sort of DACs, and what sort of DAPs. I have two DAPs, or actually I own two DAPs that are in this sort of range. The first one is the FIO M17 here on the left, and over here on the right we've got the Ibeso DX320 Max TI. Both of these are endgame DAPs, top in class, and I'm going to do a comparison of the Hiby R8ii against these. And what's really critical is how it reproduces or plays the music back and what sort of application uses to do that. One of the things each of these things have is their own native player. I'm going to put up a graph to show you the different features of these native players. You can see here on the far right, this is the FIO M17. Its native player is called FIO Music. The middle one is the Ibeso DX320 Max TI. It uses something called Mango Player. These apps, by the way, are very common for the entire range of this manufacturer's or that manufacturer's digital audio players. And then the last one, the one that we have on the table today that's been loaned to us, is the Hiby Music app that's loaded into Hiby R8ii. Any of you who have been following the channel realize that I like to use PowerAmp. I think it's a very powerful tool for loading in the PEQs and using them as both your player as well as an EQ for other streaming services like Apple Music, Tidal, and Qobuz. Now I'm going to show you the features that each of these have. Right now I actually have this loaded, so let's get to the home screen. This is the home screen on the R8ii. This is the home screen on the M17, and this is the home screen on the 320 Max. Let's go into the Hiby Music app. There it is. You can see you've got title, folder, album, artist. Album is quite nice on this. Let's see all the albums that I loaded from the SD card that I put into this DAP. One of the things that I struggled with this was actually getting the music to be recognized. And so what it does is it scans that external storage device, in this case a micro SD, and it finds the different music files, and then it finds the artwork for them out on the web. This took hours with this particular unit. It finally did do it. I walked away from it. I got so frustrated because it kept getting stuck. But I finally, when I walked away from it and came back a couple hours later, presto, it was all done. So it wasn't that it was stuck, it was that it was just taking that long to do it. These other two don't have that sort of struggle. But that being said, it's a small price to pay when you're actually loading the stuff in. Once it's done, it's done. Let's go into the settings. This is where this particular player is incredibly feature rich. When you look at the spreadsheet, look at the player with non-Android OS. All three of these are capable of running their players without the overhead of Android. You can directly use the app. It's going to save additional processing power with and without running it in Android. All three of these, so let's open the one over here as well. This is the Ibeso. This is Mango Player in Android over here. We're going to go to FIO Music and open that up, and you can see the different ways that this presents. Here's all three of them showing the album art. Let's go into the parametric EQ settings and what this thing is capable of doing, because again, this is what this channel is all about. If I go to the parametric EQ here, that's PEQ, I've actually loaded in my settings for the Camper CP622B. That's this IEM over here. Where its limitations are, it can only load 9. On the column over here where I've put the number of PEQ bands, it's a 9 versus the M17. When we go to the advanced settings, you actually get 10. When you're exporting from SquigLink, you can choose how many bands you want, but by default it's going to create 10 on the R8ii. But what it does is it cuts off the highest frequency, or the last number 10 PEQ setting, and it only loads 9 of them. You can see the bands here only go to 9 on the Hiby. One of the disadvantages of the DX320 Max is its PEQ settings, and we got to go into some music to go see it. Click here on settings, you go to EQ. You can see down here, when you go into the EQ settings here, you only have 6 filters. Here you have 10, here you have 9, and here you are limited to 6. So when I create a PEQ setting that I want to load into the native player in the Abaso, I need to go into SquigLink and delete the number of default. I need to get rid of 4 of them. So when it creates the PEQ settings, it's only creating 6 when I load it into here. This one I used the 10 file, the same file I used here. I just dropped the last one, and this one I was able to use all 10 files that are loaded into it. All of them have the ability to use the PEQ settings, and I think the Hiby R8ii is probably the easiest to use because I can directly load the files in. The FIO M17, I have to load them in manually one by one. So in the text file, I have to load in the frequency, the gain, and the Q value for each one of these bands. Once that's done, so here's deuce here. I added the CP622B. I've got 9 settings loaded in there for this. They look very similar across here. This one, you can't really see it. I really, really like the way that the R8ii allows you to adjust your PEQs. So that's the first thing. Now let's look at the other features that these other two really don't have, other than a few filters. If I go down here to this MSEB, MSEB allows you to adjust the same things like a parametric EQ, except it's naming it by the attributes that we usually rate things for critical listening. So if you look here, you've got bright and warm for your temperature, you've got a bass extension, you've got light and deep, you've got bass texture, where you've got fast or thumpy. You've got lots of different things that you can adjust. Now what I will caution you about is this MSEB is also located in the settings folder. So not just in the app, but in the settings folder. And if you adjust both of them, you're going to double up on what you're doing. So you have to select whether you're going to put it into settings, not use the Hiby Music app, use something else, or if you're using this Hiby Music app, then don't change it in the settings. Do all of your work here. And you can import different settings as well. You can save them to different IEM names. You also have plugins. These plugins are Soundfield, Balance, Dynamics, a couple of other things that I played around with, like this virtualizer. I didn't wind up using these because I thought it only confused the matter. If you start playing with this, and then you start playing with this, and then you start playing with PEQ, well, things start to get a little bit convoluted. So I thought it was best to find how the DAP functioned best without any PEQ. That is the baseline for adding the PEQ values and doing the critical listening. Again, I'll go back to the graph that I'm showing here, where the Mango player, it's the FIO Music app. It's very good. The one thing that it lacks is you can't import the PEQ settings generated from SquigLink directly, whereas you can within that Hiby Music app. You can see that I gave this a final score, or how good the functions are for this particular app, and I gave an 8 out of 10 score versus PowerAmp. From a functionality perspective, I still think PowerAmp has far more function than what the Hiby Music app has. As far as how this thing functions as a native player without having to use PowerAmp, I thought it was the best by far. One of the things that it also, probably the most important thing, is how good it sounds. If it doesn't matter how many features it has, if you're not reproducing the music to its best possible production. I thought that the Mango player worked best to reproduce the music to its true sound, and it wasn't really a function of Mango player. It's more a function of what the DAP itself can do. So let me change this graph to the next one. And this graph shows a comparison of all the other features between these DAPs here that are $2,000 plus DAPs. One of the things that was a little bit annoying about this one, you can do the screen rotation when you rotate it, but its natural setting is to have the plugs at the bottom. I like having the plugs at the top. And when I put the screen rotation on, when I did this, it wouldn't rotate. It only rotates 270 degrees. There's another function in it where you can rotate it 180 degrees out, but it locks it. Now it's locked with the plugs at the top, but it won't go sideways. That's a little bit annoying for me. Both of these are capable of rotating. You can see here on the Hiby and on the FIO and on the Abaso. I thought that the FIO is the best one of all because you get true 360 degrees even when you're logging in. Rotation its natural state is to have the plugs at the top and the volume at the top. The next thing is the actual volume selection. So when you're changing volume, the iBasso has a stepped attenuator, and a lot of people, when you first buy this, you go online, you're like, what the hell's wrong with my player? What this does is it cuts the music out, and you have to sort of find the middle of each step that clicks to actually hear the music equally on both sides. But this is true to, let's say, what you would do with a stereo, an old tuner. It's an analog system versus, let's say, this digital system that they use on the FiO. The knob on the FiO is fantastic. The Hiby actually has its volume on its side, is this knob on the side here, and then you can slide up and down. It's actually not a knob, it's a button, and you can turn the volume down or up based on where you click on this, or you can use your finger and slide this up and down. The next thing I wanted to show you, the gain. So the gain settings, it's in settings on this one. So when you go to settings, the FiO, you can go to audio, and then this allows you to select your gain. And you can see here, over ear headphone mode, you've got high gain, medium gain, and low gain. This also has like hyper gain, and I'll explain that when we get down to how much power these things put out. But when this thing is plugged in transformer, it allows you to double the amount of power that this output. This is by far the most powerful DAP, the FiO M17. This one, the gain on it, again, you go into the settings and you set the gain to what you want. There's a turbo mode, and that allows you to add a little bit more gain to it. Over here on the iBasso, it's actually a knob, another knob on the top, and what this does is it allows you to quickly just set to 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure that you're not driving something too much. If you've got some IEMs that are very sensitive, you can back this off to 2, and then you won't turn the volume knob up too far. So I really like what they've done here on the iBasso best. These two have coax. You can plug these in using a coax connection. Let's say this coax connection over here that we've got going into the K19. You can use that between the devices. This doesn't have coax, so that's one of the things that it doesn't have, one of the downsides. The next one is the USB-C DAC. They all have that. So there's a USB-C port at the bottom of each of these, and you can plug it in and it will function as a USB-C DAC. Next is the CPUs. The Hiby has an older chipset, the Snapdragon 650, whereas these two have the 660, and this has the best version of the 660, which they call an SoC. I know it's a little bit better than the standard. And then the next thing down is which Android version are they using? This is using 12, this is using 11, and this is using 10. And 11 and 12 are very similar in how they function. 10 is a little bit different. So it's a little bit older, so it's a little bit clunky, but all of them work fine. I've got these sort of in order of screen size. The FiO has the largest screen. The Hiby has the second largest screen out of these three. And then even though this thing is really big and chunky and heavy and thick, it actually has the smallest screen out of the three. Next is the weight. So let's talk about how chunky and heavy they are. This weighs 515 grams. So this is the lightest of the three, but it's also the smallest of the three. Throw up some pictures here. You can see these pictures of all three of these laying down side by side. The Hiby R8ii is very sleek. Here's what it looks like in my pocket. This is the Hiby. You can see that it slides in nice and easy, and I travel for a living, so I'm running through airports all the time. This would actually be a better unit if you're worried about how well it fits in. That's one of the things to take into consideration. The next one up is charging. So how do you charge all three of these? So these two can be charged using the USB-C cable. This one gives you the added option of using USB-C or using a transformer that's plugged into it with a wall wart. So you plug into the wall and you plug this in and it charges it faster. The iBasso requires you to plug in with a 12-volt DC wall wart transformer as well as the USB-C. And I'll tell you why. There's a good reason why they've done that. You go to the screen up here, you can see this says 100 and it says 87 right here. Well, there's an A next to the 100. That's the analog side of this unit. The 87 is the digital side. What iBasso did is they've isolated one battery, but it's actually separated into two sections. So the battery for the digital side is different than the battery for the analog side. So they've really taken a lot of effort in isolating everything that's analog and keeping it separated from the noise of the digital side. Next one up is how long it takes to charge. This one takes about 4.5 hours to charge. This one takes about 5 hours to charge. Because you're charging with two different chargers on this unit, it charges faster. So when you have them both plugged in, it charges the analog side in 2 hours, and it charges the digital side in about 3 hours. It only takes about half the time. I didn't put how long they last because that's really subjective. They're all very similar, and they'll all last you all day. Next one is how much power they put out. And this is one of the attributes that everyone likes to go to, and I had to do some backwards calculations because some people list this as volts, and I always like to use watts. First one, let's talk about the Hiby R8ii. This puts out 710 milliwatts. For a big unit, that's not very much, but when you put it into turbo mode, it gets close to 900. It's about 890 milliwatts. It really struggles to push my Grand Maestros to their full potential. So just so you know, just because this thing's big doesn't mean it can push some of the most difficult IEMs in the industry. Versus, let's say, the Abeso. The Abeso puts out in 906 milliwatts, so a little bit more. And then you come over to the Godzilla of milliwatts, and this thing puts out 1.5 watts, so 1,500 milliwatts. And then you can double it by plugging it in. Again, you plug it in, it'll come up with an option. Whether you want to go into desktop mode, you hit it, and now you've got 3 watts of power to drive really hard headphones. Next thing we're going to talk about is noise and distortion. You look at the threshold plus noise. This one has about 0.0006. This one has 0.0008. And this one measures it in a slightly different way. It says minus 102 dB at 32 ohms, which is better. This has the least amount of noise, again, because of the isolation that they do between the analog and the digital side. The next one down is the signal to noise ratio. You can see this one comes out best at 125 dB. The higher the number, the better. M17 is 120. And then last in place is the R8ii at 116. Let's talk about the chipsets that they use for their DACs. The R8ii uses something called Darwin. The RS8 uses full-blown version of Darwin. This is a bit more of a cut-down version from what I understand and doesn't sound quite as good. In the M17, this uses an ESS chipset. Very good, excellent sound quality, very good reproduction. To the Abeso, and without a doubt, this is the reason I bought this unit. It uses quad ROM BD34301 EKV chips. So what it means by quad is when you turn it into like the hyper mode, it actually uses 2 DAC chips per side instead of just one. So it's consuming more power, but this by far gives the best sound reproduction. Amp class. Talk about things being class A. Well, it's not really true Class A on the amp side. Quality of it is being Class A. Here in the Hiby, they say it's a Class A or a Class AB. You can turn the quality down. I don't know why you would do that, considering this thing costs so damn much. It does save a little bit of power. I set it to Class A when I was doing my listening. You come over here again to the M17. It doesn't actually say that it's a Class A. It doesn't make those statements, but it does have excellent sound quality and sound reproduction. And then the Abeso, it claims to be a super Class A that eliminates switching distortion of transistors with electrostat and film capacitors. I know that the Hiby also has some film capacitors in it as well, but Abeso is kind of known for building their amp sides with stereo type components. Next is the highest audio resolution. The Abeso, no surprise, I mean it is a very expensive unit, is able to reproduce at 784 kilohertz, 32-bit, versus, let's say, the M17, which gets you half of that at 348 at 32-bit, and then they say it a little bit differently on the Hiby. They call it a class-leading DSD 1024 PCM 1536/32. I don't know what that quite means. So whatever that means, if somebody wants to put that down in the comments section, I put here, whatever that means. All I know is from what I'm hearing and what this thing's reproducing, the iBasso is better. Next one up is how fast are the USB-C ports? The Hiby, being a newer unit, has the 3.2, which is a faster USB-C. This has a 3.1. This has 3. They all use Bluetooth 5.0. All of them, I didn't bother putting down the different Bluetooth protocols that they run because they all run the same. Let's talk about the sound quality ranking. This is the one that everyone's going to be most interested in. Number 1, best sound quality, best reproduction. I'd call it neutral to warm, but incredibly detailed. I would call this one neutral to warm in its reproduction, not as detailed as the iBasso. And then this one I would call neutral to bright. And I read some literature and it said that it was a warm reproduction, but I don't believe it. I tried playing around with a lot of the settings in this. So let's go to the actual settings in the Hiby R8ii. And you can see in Darwin control, you have this low pass filters where you have lots of different settings to choose from in low pass filters. You also have 2 different DSD filters. You've got the default and you've got Darwin 1. You also have a harmonic controller, which slides from 155 to 0. And then you have customized presets. This was actually really interesting. The customized presets, go out to the web and you can find the PEQ settings just like I make already loaded in here for a lot of the 64 audio stuff, some Dunu, some of the Canera, QDC, Visionaires, and I can imagine this library is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And this loads let's into that parametric EQ, the settings for this, and you can see these are new, so it shows you which ones have been loaded recently. And I can imagine it does this for headphones as well. Really cool setting or feature. I wish these other 2 had it, but PowerAmp does. Talk about PowerAmp, you're only doing like a one-time payment of $8. And once you've got it, you've got it. There's no subscription to it. You're able to make your own PEQs, load them, or go out to the web again and find ones that have already been made for different IEMs. That's why I'm a big fan of PowerAmp. The last one, giving it the best score. Money don't lie here. This thing's $3.5 grand. That's $2 grand, and that's about $1,800 retails. Very expensive digital audio players. This one, it was the winner by far for features. The componentry that they put into it, not just the player that it uses, but all of the other stuff that makes the sound quality great. Still got some glitchy stuff to it. It's a little bit clunky. Puts things upside down, as you can see, until you get into the native screen. But when you're actually in an app and you downsize it, it flips things upside down. There's little quirks that you got to put up with this. The R8ii, excellent if you like things that are a little bit brighter. If you want something that's a little bit smaller. If you don't need an incredible amount of power out of it and you'd like a big screen, this is your pony right here. It's an excellent unit. Thank you, Hiby, for sending it out and giving me some time with it. With that, DucBloke out.
Thank you for visiting DucBloke Tuning and finding the sweet spot. Your comments are very much appreciated. I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. Share the PEQ settings with you if you own these particular IEMs or if you plan on purchasing them to maximize your investment. Again, thank you so much for supporting the project.